Sony has a great start with PlayStation 4. Its upcoming PlayStation Now service sounds very interesting as well, even though the Vita still seems to be a problem child. Nonetheless, Sony's on the right track, and the company behind the PlayStation brand wants to use the E3 2014 to keep ahead of the competitors. Let's have a look at the historic E3 moments of Sony computer entertainment. It was at the first E3 Expo in 1995 that Sony showed off its first ever console, the PlayStation. Epic was the moment in which Steve Race came onto stage to announce the retail price for the brand new console.
$299.
One year later, the PlayStation had hit the market and was taking over by storm. At the E3 of 1996, games like the first Tomb Raider and Final Fantasy VII were among the big hits. In the next year, new games were shown, like the first entry in the Metal Gear Solid series and a sequel to the horror survival game Resident Evil. With the PlayStation 3 years on the market, you would start to wonder about a successor. All Sony did was showcase new games, for example Gran Turismo. It was at the last E3 of the previous century when Sony started talking about a new generation of consoles. But first they had to show off the ballroom dance from Final Fantasy VIII and the new Gran Turismo 2. It was after the turn of the millennium when Sony showed the PlayStation 2 for the first time at E3. Its increased processing power was a great leap forward. One of the big jaw-droppers at the time was Metal Gear Solid 2. In the year that followed, the new Metal Gear was still there to be worshipped, but so were titles like the action-packed Devil May Cry and the horror-adventure game Silent Hill 2. It was in 2002 that the PlayStation 2 started to become the console with many cool game characters. The adventure game Sly Cooper and the heroic duo Ratchet and Clank were presented as new key titles for the PlayStation generation. A year later, it was time for Sony to enter the realm of portable gaming. The power and magic of PlayStation in your pocket. That was the promise of the PSP, short for PlayStation Portable. And if you still preferred the PS2, there was Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater to look out for.
何様のつもりだ。また車泥棒か？違う！潜入任務だ。ここは都会じゃねえんだからよ。ここはジャングルだ。
At the E3 2004, Sony introduced a new action series that we still praise for its outstanding gameplay, God of War. The company also showcased Gran Turismo 4 and many games for the PSP. The era of the PlayStation 2 was far from over, but in 2005 it was time for a change. Sony entered the realm of high-definition gaming and announced the PlayStation 3.
Everyone, this is PlayStation 3.
Sony showcased games like Killzone, a small tech demo for Final Fantasy, the racing game MotorStorm, and, of course, the famous Rubber Ducks tech demo.
And for the technically minded amongst you, this demo uses LOD, which is lots of ducks. Ba-boom!
Even though Sony made the right move to switch the boomerang with the 6-axis controller, the E3 2006 presentation was hilarious.
Ridge Racer!
The PlayStation 3 was way too pricey, and hilarious commentary made this whole show legend.
Genji 2 is an action game which is based on Japanese history.
Wait for it.
Character here. So here's this giant enemy crab.
Derry.
And you attack its weak point for massive damage.
With the PlayStation 3 on the market, it was time to announce games for the expensive next-gen monster. The action-adventure game Lair, a teaser for Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots,
I'm just an old killer.
and of course Infamous were among the biggest games for the new Sony console. At the E3 of 2008, the God of War series made its debut on PlayStation 3.
In the end, there will be only chaos.
Sony also introduced creative titles like Little Big Planet, which is the Mario game for PlayStation. Struggling to make the PSP a worthy competitor for the Nintendo DS, Sony introduced the Psp Go at the E3 2009. Just like apps for smartphones, games for the Psp Go had to be downloaded instead of bought on a disc. Sony also showed the jaw-dropping action-adventure game Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. The biggest scoop, however, was a tech demo for something Sony called the PlayStation Wand. It looked like the Wii Remote, but was much more accurate.
Looking forward to sharing more about the motion controller with you in the near future. Thank you, everyone.
In 2010, Sony announced PlayStation Move.
How it happens in your hand is how it happens on the screen.
The company also showed games like Gran Turismo 5, God of War Ghost of Sparta, and the return of the Twisted Metal franchise. The coolest thing, however, was the speech by Kevin Butler.
Gaming is having a ridiculously huge TV in a tiny one-room apartment. Staying up till 3 a.m. to earn a trophy that isn't real. But is.
1 year after the epic speech, Sony announced the PlayStation Vita. A complete revamp of handheld hardware might just do the trick to gain momentum and offer competition for Nintendo and the rise of smartphones. Besides the Vita and many of its games, Sony announced the third game in the Uncharted series. That action-adventure series has grown to become one of the key franchises for PlayStation 3.
Finally, Drake's secret will be revealed.
The 2012 edition of the Sony press conference at E3 was one with a strong emphasis on new games, ranging from the storytelling children's game Wonder Book to the party fighter PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. Big were the announcements for games like the action survival game The Last of Us and the story-driven action-adventure game Beyond Two Souls. At last year's E3, we all knew the PlayStation 4 was coming. The big question was, when and for how much? Sony priced the PS4 at $399, and it would be coming during the holiday season. As a quick jab at Microsoft, the company stated it would not impose any new restrictions on used games.
Guess that's a good thing.
Big games that Sony showed were Killzone Shadowfall, Infamous Second Son, and it announced The Order 1886. Other publishers showed games like Destiny and the long-awaited Kingdom Hearts 3. Since its release, Sony has sold a lot of PlayStation 4 consoles. In order to keep up momentum, they will need to come up with system sellers like Uncharted 4. We also expect God of War 4 and maybe some news about Guerrilla's upcoming RPG. From the hardware side, we expect news about Sony's streaming service PlayStation Now. All Sony secrets will be revealed on June 9th, and we will cover them all.